Thank you, Nick. I wasn't expecting that. Wow. Um, it's great to be here. I thought I was getting some intro song, but obviously not. But I can live with that. Wow, man, I'm fucking nervous. Yeah, so I'm going to tell you a bit about my story and where I come from. Um, I live in Denmark now, and I have been for the past 20 years. But way before that, I lived in Australia. I moved there when I was 9, and through my childhood, I quickly found out that I was very different to other people. Um, uh, and the best way I can describe it is later on in my life when we go out partying. Um, and the friends that I have, they come out partying on the weekends. And when Saturday night finishes, they go home, they go to work on Monday morning, they live their lives with their family and their wife, and then they come out partying again. The only difference is I go out partying with them on the Saturday, and I party all through the week, and then I meet up with them on the Friday, and they're like fresh. They've been sleeping all during the week. I haven't slept yet. And their lifestyle is normal, working, and I pretty much deal drugs, and I could never understand why they seemed so fresh. And I could do this several weekends in a row. And usually it would end up with me just collapsing somewhere. Usually it would luckily be like a private party or something. And I have a quick sample of that. I'm at this after party, and I've been up for, I took account of it for some reason, 16 days. And, I'm at that stage where you're seeing shadows run past you. There's snipers out there, and there's police helicopters following you around and stuff. And I'm sitting in the middle of this lounge room, and I've got drugs and money all around me. The next thing I know, I wake up, and when I'm sitting there, it's full, people are partying. But I wake up, and it's empty, and the door is shut. And I'm like, oh, fuck, I got to go to this party. And I'm calling my friends and stuff, and they're like, that was 2.5 days ago. So I had fallen asleep in the middle of this lounge room, and they had closed the door and accepted that they probably couldn't wake me because I'd been up for that long and I was so long gone. Um, and that pretty much describes, how I lived for many, many years. And they were actually the good years. Because when I turn 19, I start shooting it up, and everything goes a lot quicker. I also changed the people that I hang around. From being more of a club scene kind of a guy to more of a street scene kind of a guy, if that makes sense. Um, and things go very quickly down the hill. At this stage, I've also isolated myself from my mother and my stepfather, and the good friends that I had for several years. Um, they were unimportant to me because they were telling me some truths that I didn't want to hear. Um, and it from being this, as I saw myself, big ass drug dealer, to a guy all of a sudden living on the streets, no close relations, living under a staircase from time to time, and just being awake, um, just living for the next high. Um, and I'm pretty much in and out of shelters, in and out of prison. Um, and I think the first time when I look back, have a godly experience is when I get done for something pretty hard. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. um, and I meet up in court, and the prosecutors get the wrong court, so they turn up at a different courtroom. I probably would have ended up with quite a few years, but I end up getting 6 months. And during those 6 months, I'm in prison. I'm getting clean. They had shit drugs in there, so I couldn't really be bothered with them. And I have a series of dreams. I have these two dreams. One of them is, like a series like you watch, like Game of Thrones or something. I had these two sets of dreams. One of them was that I was learning to fly. So, it started off where I could just like levitate a little bit, but I didn't land properly. And during these 6 months, I learned to fly. All of a sudden, I was flying around in my dreams. And the other one had to do with water. So they started with like dark, murky water where there were sharks and it was dangerous. And the last dream I had was waking up in a bathtub full of clear water. And this all has to do with feelings and stuff, and where the flying had to do with escape. And I make a decision that I need to do something different with my life. And at this stage, I think I'm 24, because I can see where I'm going. That this is no life. I'm just going to go in and out of jails. The time span is going to be longer and longer and longer. And the solution is that I need to geographically remove myself from Australia. And another problem that I have is also that Australians, they don't really understand me. You see, because I'm from Denmark, and the thought that moving back to Denmark, people will all of a sudden understand me. And the third reason is that to get away from the network that I have, and get a new network. So I move to Denmark. This is like 20 years ago today, so you can probably imagine that I didn't manage to stay clean from that day. And but I learned some things, and this was like the beginning of my travel to where I am today. First of all, I learned that I can't change my surroundings by changing my surroundings. You know what I mean? And that in order for me to attract a new breed, if you can put it like that, I need to change into something inside of myself. So we can guess what happens. I pretty much attract the same people that I knew back in Australia, except the only difference was that they spoke Danish and not Australian. And the thought of that I was just going to drink from now on. 1 second. That's my phone going off there. I'm just going to put it down here. I'm just going to drink, and I just need to get a normal legal job. Not deal drugs anymore. Obviously that doesn't work either. And I meet my father a while after, and at this stage he's a drug addict as well, and he's living in a shelter. He's living in a shelter called the Men's Home. It's pretty well known. It's like in the middle of the red light district of Copenhagen. And I meet up with him, and I go into this shelter, and I'm looking a lot better than what I was when I was living in Australia. And I thought now it's all under control. And I walk into this shelter with this brand new watch. It was really shiny and it looked really expensive, but it was fake. And I sat down really cool in a chair there, and with my watch up on the table, and I looked out at all the people there, and I thought, oh, poor guys. And my father comes out, and I felt a little bit ashamed. Look at this guy. I do love him, but look at him. And But funnily enough, we start talking a bit about one of his friends, and we end up going to smoke some crack that day. And very quickly, I decide that I'm going to start dealing again, because now I'm going to show the world who I am and how much of a hardcore drug dealer that I really am. You know what I mean? And everything is actually going quite well. Um, and now I'm thinking, I'm really going to show the world. But being that person that I am, and using the way that I use, that picture crumbles pretty quickly as well. Um, and that family that I was moving back to, one of the reasons I was moving back to Denmark was also to be with my family. Um, I had isolated myself from them, and now I was living on the street again. Whew. Um, and the father that I was so ashamed to have offers me a room on the floor beneath his in this shelter, and I take it and I move in, and now I'm living in a shelter uh, with my dad. Um, and at this stage, I'm fucking crazy. Like they had like a scaffolding around this shelter, and I was climbing. I was sky high, and I would climb around. I climb in other people's rooms looking for drugs and money and shit, and I'd hang from the top and stuff like that. And I think they had enough of me, and I don't think you can get thrown out of that place, but I got thrown out of it. And they moved me to a place called Sundholm, and which we call the end station. It's for drug addicts that have no hope. There's no life for these guys, and they just get put there to live till they die. Uh, that was where I was at. And during this time, my mother, she moves from Australia back to Denmark to try to save me. Um, and I need to kind of wind back, because my mother's always been a very loving mother for me, and she's always been there for me through all the things. She's also sat in all the courts, listening to all the shit that I had done so that I could get off easier. And a few years before that, we were supposed to come to Denmark together, and I just stayed away. And she came to Denmark without me. And I remember seeing a, 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 a recording. My grandmother used to record everything the family did. A recording of her landing in Denmark, and I could just see in her eyes that something was wrong. You know, obviously she was thinking about her son. Where was her son? Like a mother would. And actually, 2 years go by. She doesn't hear from me. And at this stage, I'm living in a shelter, in a squat, where I'm dealing drugs out of. And usually this squat is jam-packed with people. And there's this one guy who sits by the landline telephone, and who's the only guy that's allowed to answer it. But on this very day, I'm sitting in there all alone. No one's there. The guy's not by the landline telephone, and the phone rings. And something inside of me says, answer that phone. And I answer it, and I say hello, and my mother can hear it's me, and she says, "Gabriel, is that you?" And I remember the feeling of instant pain. Like I was fucked, but that pain was unmeasurable. And even though I wanted to talk with her, because she's my mother, the only thing I can think about is to put that phone down and escape from that feeling. Now, to me, that's obviously God coming in again, but not for me, but for my mother, just to let her know that I am still alive. Um, so yeah, so she's been through a lot with me, and so she moves to Denmark for 9 months, trying to save me. She's talked with some people from some of the fellowships. So she kind of has an idea of how to approach me. And she'd come out of like dark alleyways when I was just wandering somewhere. And she'd say, "Gabriel, why don't you come and get something to eat?" And sometimes I would say yes, because then I could lend 200 kroner. I could lend 200 kroner from her. And one day she somehow manipulates me to come home with her to my grandmother's. And obviously with the same intention, I think, okay, no problem. And I go home and I try to look like I'm eating the food, you know. And when we're finished, I say, "Mum, can I lend 200 kroner?" And on this very day, something different happens, because all through the years, all through everything that she's been through with me, she's kept a stone face, and she hasn't shown me the hurt that I've caused her. But on this very day, she just breaks down, and and I break down as well, and we hold each other, and something happens. Um, I feel myself removed from self, and I see myself from out here holding my mother. And in that instant, I think I need to do something different. I need to change the way that I'm living, and um, but not for myself, but for my mother, for my mother. And in that moment, I decide, it's probably a good idea to go into rehab. Um, and at this stage, I'm weighing 57 kilos. You can see my spinal cord. Um, I still think I'm the fucking shit, right? And I'd always chat up the 7-Eleven chicks behind the counter, think, yeah, but and so I was obviously completely in denial, but I was doing this for my mother, and while I'm there, I make some decisions, and pretty much it's all got to do with money and prestige, you know. When I get out, I need to get a job and make a shitload of money, and everything will be all right. And I go into this other rehab, and this therapist uh, asked me, "Gabriel, what are you going to do when you're finished?" And I say, "Well, I'm going to go out and be the CEO of the biggest energy company in Denmark." And he goes, "Oh, and how are you going to do that?" And I remember I just glared at him like, "Do you know who I am?" But in all reality, I'd just been in a rehab, and before that, living on the streets as a street junkie. And I expected him to be able to see that possibility. Um, and while I was there, I also learned something about, you know, if I really wanted to be this CEO, I needed to work. I needed to do a lot of steps and many years of hard work to get there. And I thought, okay, I can do that. And I started going to school, um, and I actually got into a bachelor and did 2 years. And after 2 years, by this time I'm not living on the streets, and I'm not using like I was before this. Um, but I'm using, and I can't do my homework, and I don't really understand what's going on there anymore, and I decide to stop. And in that instant, this picture of this coming CEO fell totally apart, and the hopes and dreams that I created fell apart, and I started using again, started dealing again, the same story. But at this stage, I knew that there was fellowships out there, and I knew there was help to get. So I got to rehab again for 3 months, and this time I want to do something completely different. I've tried, the money thing. Well, I haven't really got any money, but it didn't really work. Um, so I make some decisions, and one of them is that I'm going to listen to some other people who have gone this way before me, even though it sounds totally ridiculous. Like, how could they be right? You know what I mean? And all the voices inside my head, don't listen to this guy. He's a fucking idiot, and look at him. You know what I mean? And I also make a decision that money isn't going to be the main theme of the solution to my problem. There has to be some other things. And the third thing was, like I didn't feel part of in Australia, I also tried some meetings the first time, and that didn't really work out either because I didn't really feel part of there either. You know what I mean? I was different, and people were kind of snobs and stuff. So I made the decision that I was going to go to meetings, and I was going to do some service, even though I didn't really like the sound of it. Um, Yeah, and I think, and this is like 2014. On 3 months after I come out, I I'm walking down the street, and there's this chubby guy. He's like flat out. He's handing out pamphlets, and he's talking on the phone, and he's talking to this other guy, and he's got something going on over here at the same time. And I really like him because I can identify with this guy. Um, and I take one of these pamphlets because I want to see what he's got. And it's a CA pamphlet. And the first CA meeting in Denmark has just been started. And I thought, I like this guy. I'm going to try one of these meetings. And I remember walking in the first time, and as soon as I walked in, I felt part of. I was accepted. Someone offered me coffee, and it was just love at first sight. And I really felt like I was home. Um, and looking back at this, that that CA soul that we have here tonight, or we have here on this weekend, and we have at the meetings and all that, it was already there. From the very first meeting, I could feel that energy, and I wanted that, and I felt like I was part of it, and I still feel part of it as much today. Anyway, now we get to the steps bit, because people were talking about the steps, and it sounded interesting, right? And people were coming up to me, shouldn't you start doing the steps? And I was like, I need to understand them before I can start them. And I really did mean it too. You know what I mean? Like, I just got to read a few books, and I got to read some books about some other stuff, and and then I'll contemplate it. Mate, you're gonna be fucking dead before that happens. So anyway, and one of my big dreams is to travel around the world. And some of these guys, they're traveling, they're going to international conventions with other like-minded people. And I think this sounds interesting. Um, and at my second convention, which was actually here in Holland, this old timer comes up to me and he goes, "Gabriel, are you happy?" Um, and I say, "Yeah, I'm happy." And he says, "Are you sure?" And he just walks off. And and for a guy like me, who really likes complicated stuff, that really fucked with my mind. And so I'm running around to my friends at the convention, going, "This guy said this," and blah blah blah. And everyone's gone looking at me strangely. And I go over to my last friend and I tell him about it, and he says, "Oh, that's because I told him you hadn't done the steps yet." So what this guy was pretty much saying to me was, perhaps you are happy. And I was truly happy, and I was, grateful, and to be where I was in my life, like, it was a huge thing for me. But what he was saying was I could be even happier. And us addicts, we want more, right? And that was actually the thing that got me to do the steps. So when I got back, I started doing the steps, and he was right. Um, and I think in my ninth step is where, in the moment, I knew that I was having a spiritual experience, my first real spiritual experience. And on this day, I'm sitting, I'm doing a ninth step with my mum, and a bit later, and I'm sitting outside this gym with a gym buddy smoking a cigarette, and something flies and lands on my white t-shirt. And usually I'll just flick it off and not think anything of it. But on this very day, I look down, and it's a bright blue dragonfly. And I go like this, and it jumps up on my finger, and I look up at my gym buddy, and he goes, "That shit means something." And we get goosebumps, right? Um, and anyway, I go to meet with my mother. She's checked it at an Airbnb. Um, and I sit down with her, and also tell her about this dragonfly. And me and my mother, we're both big fans of symbolism and that kind of stuff. And a dragonfly signifies change, and a lot of other things that you are very relatable to especially the ninth step, but change in general, and growing. And anyway, I do this ninth step with her, and I finish up with saying, is there anything else I can do to make everything right again? And she obviously says, "Gabriel, just keep doing what you're doing, and I'll be happy." And as she says that, my eyes zoom in on this poster across the room from me, and up in the top right hand corner is a dragonfly. And as I'm sitting back, I zone out at the whole poster. And the poster is of a woman's face, and her eyes are looking directly up at the dragonfly. Now that's God saying to me, "I showed you the first time, and now I'm showing you a second time. I fucking hope you understand what's going on." Um, and and that was when I got that experience when I found out what God was. It wasn't like a man with a huge beard sitting on a cloud somewhere. You know what I mean? It was something a lot greater than that. Um, and I always like to tell the story that it wasn't God that found me. God had always been there for me, but I hadn't opened my eyes to see Him. I chose not to see it. I was blocked, and that's why we do these steps. Um, so this story is back in Australia. I'm uh, living on the streets. I'm sitting outside this place called the Esquire Motel, and it's pretty much where all the dealers hang out, and prostitutes and all that. And I used to deal to all of them, and they all used to owe me money. But on this very day, I'm not living anywhere. I owe them money, and I just want to get on, but I haven't got any money. I've got $2 in my pocket, which you can't buy much with. And I remember thinking to myself, if I just had a place to sleep and some food to eat, everything would be all right. And something says inside of me, go over. There's a garage sale on the other side. Go over there and have a look. I go over there and I have a look, and I'm standing and looking at these old books, um, and something says to me, "Buy those two books." So I buy, I buy two old books with my last $2. I don't live anywhere. What? I'm not going to read the books. And what the hell am I going to do with them? Am I going to carry them around in the street? You know what I mean? This is fucking ridiculous. So I sit down in the gutter again, and I flick the pages, and they open on these two pages, and inside of them there are two old $50 notes. That's God saying, "Go get a bed and go get some food to eat." But the Esquire Motel's right behind me, right? So we know what happened. And 30 minutes later, I'm sitting in the gutter, same problem. God was ready to help me as long as I opened my eyes. He'd be there. Um, yeah, and you'd think the story with the dragonfly would end there, but it doesn't. So I'm on the second date with this girl, um, and I'm telling her a little bit about my life. The first couple of years, you have a feeling that you need to tell everyone where you came from, right? Like, oh, by the way, I'm an ex-junkie. You know what I mean? I didn't actually say that to her, and I think I had about a year and a half. Then I told her I had a bit over 2 years. I need, 1.5 years. That was kind of shit. And so I sat down with her, and I'm telling her a bit about the steps, and I'm telling her about the ninth step and the experience with my mother. And when I'm telling her that, I see like a change in her eyes, and I'm thinking in the back of my mind, I've said too much. I should have just shut the fuck up. And she looks at me and she goes, "How did you know?" And I'm like, "How did I know what?" Uh, and what had happened was she had this necklace with a dragonfly who her father had given to her just before he died. That was very close to her, and she wasn't wearing it that night, but I don't know, thought maybe I was spying on her or something. I don't know. And I said, "I don't know." But at that time and moment, we connected. You know, God used the same fucking sign, motherfucker. But but that was magical, man. And today I'm still with her. Um, so on the third date, she's made great food for me, all that, way too much. And she says, "By the way, what does CA stand for?" And I go, "Cocaine Anonymous," and she goes, "Cocaine?" And I'm like, "Oh fuck." But she stuck around, and we could actually, she had some people in the family who had some shit going on, so she could relate to it, and we got all through it. Um, yeah. How long have I spoken for? Since then, 10 years have gone by, and I've been to a lot of conventions. I've met a lot of fantastic people. Um, I have two businesses. I have a loving wife who has tried magic mushrooms once by accident, which is great. And I have everything that I could ever dream of. And I'm just going to finish up on this because what I had always been in search of is right here, and it's peace, and it's freedom, and it's what we get by doing these steps and by hanging around with other like-minded people. I think I'm just going to leave it at that. Thank you, guys.
We have a present for you. All right. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, man. Thank you.